Fox News alert, another bad day to be a panicking. Trump scored a hat trick. He crossed 3 countries off his tariff hit list. You ready? First, it was the Philippines and Indonesia, the magic number 19% for both countries. And then the big one, the Japanese. $550 billion invested here and thousands of jobs created. And they'll be paying a 15% rate. Turns out Toyota tariffs work.
Secretary, how much revenue have you raised so far from tariffs? I know that we saw a budget surplus in the Treasury in the month of June. Last time we saw a budget surplus was President Trump's first term. Is that largely because of the tariff revenue, and how much have you raised so far this year?
Well, we're closing in on $100 billion. I think we could annualize at $300 billion. So a way to think about that is that's roughly 1% of our U.S. 30 trillion GDP.
Well, it turns out that Taco Trump, as the Democrats have been constantly calling him, has quite shockingly delivered real and actual tangible results here yet again. Isn't it funny how that works? Because we are so often told that Trump always caves, Trump always chickens out, the tariff threats are not even real, they're not to be taken seriously. Of course, the trade deals and negotiations are not happening, you're never going to see them. Well, pretty shockingly to those people, not shocking to anyone else who has been paying attention, but today we saw a late surge in the afternoon on the stock market after Donald Trump brought the announcement that not just one, but 2 major trade deals have been reached with America's economic partners in Asia. And we're talking here specifically, firstly, about the fact that earlier today, after meeting with the president of the Philippines at the White House, Trump announced a great trade deal being reached with the Philippines. That is obviously a major manufacturing partner of the U.S., as well as, strategically speaking, an important nation geographically to be in good relations with in the Pacific Ocean against, the rising tide of China and all that stuff. But then after that, almost out of left field, Trump also announced today that a trade deal has been reached with the nation of Japan. And of course, they told us it could not be done. They said, it is Japanese culture, right? They're protectionist, they're restrictionist on things. They will never want to do things like buy American cars or open their markets to American goods. Well, apparently, we just never actually had the right president, because we also got the news on this front. So we got to tell you all about that here today, as well as the hilarious aspect that as many of these Asian nations, I think we've now had Vietnam, Indonesia, now the Philippines, now Japan, are striking deals with the United States. The poor Canadians, Mark Carney, his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, all these people continue to look like idiots because they are being left behind on the economic stage by the United States. And, you kind of got to feel bad, but at the same time, it's a little comical to watch, let's be honest. So we'll get into all of that news here today as the Dow Jones closes 179 points in the green at the end of trading today. So with that said, guys, as usual, do us a big favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing here, guys, is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. With that said, so let us start here with the announcement out of the Philippines. Donald Trump putting out today on Truth Social after inviting President Marcos to the White House, saying President Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines is just leaving the White House with all of his many representatives. It was a beautiful visit, and we concluded our trade deal whereby the Philippines is going to open its market with the United States and 0 tariffs. And interestingly, right, when I saw the first trade deal, I forget the first nation that did it. I think it might have been Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken, but one of those nations in Asia where they basically did this similar model where U.S. puts on about a 20% tariff on Asian goods. Going into the Asian markets, U.S. goods face no tariffs, right? So the one point I made about this was the moment you see the first domino fall, many others will come. Right, because it turns out other nations are like, hey, that country's doing it. Let's get on board with this. We also have a similar relationship with the U.S. And so that's what you're seeing en masse here. So that is the deal. The Philippines will pay a 19% tariff. U.S. pays 0% tariff to sell things in the Philippines. It was a great honor to be with the president. He was highly respected in his country, as he should be. He's also a very good and tough negotiator. We extend our warmest regards to the wonderful people of the Philippines. And I think, obviously, the 20%, 19% tariff there. When you're talking, first of all, this is the point I so often bring up, about nations that are basically manufacturing very cheap goods to sell to the United States, a 19 to 20% tariff is not something you substantially feel, right? Because you're talking about goods. I mean, go look at Alibaba if you don't believe me, that are basically being created here, produced for like $1 or $2, being sold for instance, just an example, maybe $10, $15, to even $20 on US markets. This is not something as we actually covered yesterday on mass, the exporters, the foreign nations are indeed eating the majority of the tariffs, hence why import prices into the United States are down. So this is all to say 19% tariff, free revenue for the United States, does a little bit to boost American industry, but you will also not see a significant increase in the prices of goods because of that. So that's on one hand. But on the other hand, I think the other important point to be seen in this is the zero tariffs that the U.S. has to deal with going into the Philippines. That's obviously advantageous for us, but as I've so often made the case, when you look at a nation like Japan in the 80s and 90s, China in the modern day, many others though as well, a big crisis I see in America's global economic standing is that basically we're allowing other nations to become rich off of us, right? Because obviously American consumers, we're a consumerist capitalist society. We spend a lot of money. We have the most money, right? We like to do that stuff. So basically, other nations have come into our markets and made a lot of money selling their goods to our customers. And obviously, a lot of those profits have seen their way back to the home countries, hence why, Japan basically in the 80s and 90s was like the country of the future. Now China, they're building these big LED cities with all the money, right? They're saying China's the country of the future, all this stuff, right? And here's my thing about it. Is on one hand, I don't really have a problem necessarily with like other nations doing trade or, getting rich off the US. But simultaneously, why did we allow that to happen for so many decades? Basically allowing all these goods to come into the US, tariff free, essentially, talking about like 2 to 3% tariffs, very low there. While when American companies want to do the same, right? Enrich our country by selling our goods in other nations, you can't sell in a nation like, say, China or Japan because you face significant, first of all, tariffs, but also non-tariff barriers that make it essentially impossible. Why? Because these nations see a vested interest in being protectionist and keeping their own domestic industry alive, and that's fine. But if they're going to do that, it's also kind of corrupt and imbalance, right? This is why we talk about reciprocal tariffs, for them to basically be able to use the U.S. as a free trade zone, but it's not reciprocated. That's why it's so important here that to balance many decades of that, unfair relationship, now you're getting actually zero tariffs on U.S. goods into Asian markets. That's something, to make a very long story short here, that will make a lot of money for American businesses. And so ultimately here, this is a win-win. But as Kevin O'Leary went on Fox today to point out, the advantages with reaching a deal with the Philippines actually do not end there, because it turns out there's more details here to discuss. Take a listen.
How important is Philippines in that world where the president is in Asia, looking and trying to reset over there and do some good tariff deals?
It's more important than many other countries because it's strategic militarily in the narrative going on with China. And we need access to that landmass if we're going to talk about, protecting our interests in Taiwan and that region. Also a good trade partner. A lot of manufacturing is moved out of China there. We do some business there. It would be good to have a reciprocal tariff that's low with the Philippines. It would be better. It's a good country to do business with, and it's been friendly for a long time to the U.S. So you want those metrics in deals. And I think Trump made it very clear that it's more than just trade. So many of these countries now are getting tied up into the China narrative in that region. It's right. Because we're not really in a trade dispute only with China. We're in an economic war, an AI war, an IP theft war, access to capital markets war. And, this is a chess piece in that. And I think that's what you heard today. I always find these press conferences are a little weird for the country that's been invited, because they end up being a much broader narrative than just Philippines business. And that's a little unusual, but that's the way Trump operates. He is watch the sausage being made and roll the camera.
Right, and that's the other aspect of the Asia trade deals. Now counting up again, we've had Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Japan. I might actually be missing some. There might actually be more than that. is that this is all in many ways leverage against China for a number of reasons. First of all, when you talk about the decoupling from potentially the supply chain reliance on China, yeah, I mean, you could also kind of do that by moving things to nations like Vietnam, Philippines, etc. Probably best in some ways that you get things to the United States, but, there's a balance, there's a transition process. Okay, we understand all of that. But also, secondly, it's about kind of buying a form of soft power as well, right? You want to be on positive trading relations. You want to have that done, settled, understood with these nations to also, right, make it the case to China, like, look, in terms of our negotiations, we're kind of buying up a lot of Asia right now as we speak as well, right? You think you own these countries, you think you're the real power player. Okay, well, we have our own deal on the table. So, there's many different levels on that. Kevin O'Leary, of course, also notes the military significance that a nation like the Philippines may pose in that way as well. But that's, of course, why this is also important, right? It's not just about a trading deal, you might say, with, how relevant is Indonesia? It's not just about that. It's about kind of setting up this greater trading partnership with the Asian sort of continent that is well-defined, understood, advantageous for the United States, but also kind of, sends a message, sends a statement, to China there.
And we've had some great drills lately. We're back with them. I think I can say that the last administration was not getting along with them too well. They didn't get along with anybody. They didn't know. Honestly, they didn't know what they were doing. But we have some fantastic military relationships with the Philippines, and that's been reinstituted. And Pete, I would say that you couldn't be happier, right, with the relationship.
Great partners.
So I just want to say it's an honor to have you. We're going to talk about trade today, and we're very close to finishing a trade deal, big trade deal actually. And we do a lot of business with you. It's a lot of income coming in for both groups. But I was surprised to see the kind of numbers. They're very big, and they're going to get bigger under what we're doing and what we're proposing. And I just want to thank you for being with us. It's a great honor. You and your representatives, really.
Now, with all of that in mind, okay, so understanding the many benefits to what we're seeing right now, whether that's enriching American businesses, leveraging against China, or just overall improving our relationship with trading partners, raising more money for the U.S. government, by the way, a major part of that narrative that the libertarians seem to miss, right? We saw a budget surplus in the month of June. Well, we also got the announcement today, arguably the no offense, but more important one, right? Because Japan, huge trading partner there, obviously, from Donald Trump saying, quote, "We just completed a massive deal with Japan, perhaps the largest deal ever made. Japan will invest at my direction $550 billion into the United States, which will receive 90% of the profits." Wow. This deal will create hundreds of thousands of jobs. There has never been anything like it. Perhaps most importantly, Japan will open their country to trade, including cars and trucks, as I brought up before, right? The fairness there. Hey, if the Japanese sell so many cars into the United States, and I don't have a problem with that, right? They're pretty reliable, etc. But it should be a reciprocal process, right? If Japan can come in low tariff and sell stuff in the U.S., then the U.S. should be able to sell, as Donald Trump said in his 2016 first initial campaign speech. When's the last time you saw a Chevrolet in Tokyo or a Ford in Berlin? We're not saying that, people say, they'll never drive these cars. Well, that's actually not the case. It's the case that it's an unfair market. You can barely sell these cars in those foreign markets because these nations, like Japan especially, put high trade barriers that are now, of course, being lifted. And that means what again? Money for America. Rice and other certain agricultural products and other things. Japan will pay a reciprocal tariff to the United States of 15%. So essentially now for the first time ever, because the story has long been essentially the U.S., Japanese pay almost no tariff to us. We're paying exorbitant tariff, right? In some cases, like 50 to 100% when you count in the trade barriers and all that on American goods. Now it's actually fair. It's just even. We pay 15%, you pay 15%. Yeah, now we can compete in the free market. And hey, if the narrative is true, American cars suck, American products suck. Okay, that's free market, right? But at least give us a fair chance. I think, frankly, what you're going to see, the surprise that the world is going to find is that, no, actually, when they're allowed to compete fairly, American products can do okay. They can eat up a significant market share, even in foreign markets. And but ultimately, right, we'll see on that front. He goes on here to say this is a very exciting time for the United States of America, and especially for the fact that we will always continue to have a great relationship with the country of Japan. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And this is, of course, also important because when you talk about the China narrative, not to bring that up again, but of course, South Korea and Japan are our two most major allies in that region. And there was some talk, there was some speculation on Liberation Day that, oh, South Korea is going to go flip sides. They're going to go to China, right? Japan's going to go to China. Well, this is proving, no, that's not happening. We just needed a better deal, a reciprocal deal, a fair deal. And so there you have it. Here is the announcement out of the words himself of Donald Trump today at the White House.
But I just signed the largest trade deal in history. I think maybe the largest deal in history with Japan. And that was done with Japan. They had their top people here, and we worked on it long and hard, and it's a great deal for everybody. I always say it has to be great for everybody. It's a great deal. A lot different from the deals in the past, I can tell you that. But we're doing really well as a country. We're strong. We have a lot of money flowing in. The tariffs are kicked in better than anybody other than me and a few of the people in the room thought could happen, Howard and Scott. And I just want to thank you. You've been unbelievable allies, because you're really allies. That's what you've been, and we appreciate it. Some were very difficult, but you got there. And some were a little bit, they had a little confidence, and they came in early, and we just appreciate everybody. But
so there you go. Big news. Trump is calling it potentially the biggest trade deal ever. Now, with that said, as you see, right, the U.S. rewriting in a positive direction for America, its economic relationship and trading partnerships with, the Asian nations, UK, another place where we've seen a trade deal be struck. The people right now who are fuming about being left behind are none other than the Canadians. Okay, the poor Canadians are saying, where's our trade deal? No, right? But, kind of Mark Carney did this to himself, campaigned on being so tough against Donald Trump. I'm not going to give them an inch. We're not even going to speak until he stops calling it 51st state, all this garbage. And then now is desperately saying, no, please, we need you, America. Please give us a trade deal. And kind of fuming here about the fact, giving a complete word salad over the possibility that he will not be reaching a trade deal by August 1st. August 1st is, of course, significant because it's the date where, if a nation doesn't have a deal with us, or at least is getting started on that, then you're going to be seeing very high tariffs be reinstated here. And Carney is incompetent as ever. Again, the Prime Minister here of Canada really does not seem like he has much to say. Take a listen for yourself.
How realistic is it to get a deal by August 1st?
Well, that depends. There's two sides to a deal. We will, obviously, we're working on behalf of Canadians, and we will agree a deal if there's one on the table that is in the best interest of Canadians, just as the United States will do in the look for the best interests of the U.S. There have been a series of discussions. Senior ministers have been in Washington. They'll be returning. Mr. LeBlanc, for example, will be in Washington for the balance of the week, as will be my chief of staff, other officials, for those discussions. But they're complex negotiations, and we'll use all the time that's necessary and agree something that's in the interests of Canadians, if that's available.
Okay, so spoiler and translation there. There's not going to be a deal by August 1st. They're nowhere close. Because Mark Carney, of course, the guy who revamped the Liberal Party, they were dead on arrival. They were bound to lose the election, but he said, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be tough against Donald Trump. Well, now he's realizing, wait, we can't be all that tough because we kind of need America economically. So now he's like, okay, but I was a business guy one time too. I'm just like Trump. Hey, I'm going to go in and make a deal. How's that going for you, Mark Carney? You fool. How's it going for the voters who were ready to actually vote for the national restoration of their country? And then at the last minute said, oh, Trump derangement syndrome is more important than like our kids' economic future. How are you feeling right now, huh? How's the standing up to Trump really going? Are you restoring your sovereignty, or is your prime minister being a fool, having a fool made out of him on the national stage, or the global stage, I guess I should say? You know the story there. So those poor Canadians and the poor conservative Canadians. I mean, it's just unbelievable. This absolute buffoon watching as all these other deals get made. And literally the nation he started the trade war with first, if you remember, right? It all started with Canada in the second term. Still can't make a deal. Incompetence, to say the least. And hey, who needs it more? Obviously, the Canadian economy than the American economy. We're making other deals. You guys are not. You guys need us, right? Obviously. But apparently, he's not doing so well. But with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on all of this news in the comment section down below. What do you think of the trade deal with Philippines? What do you think of Japan? What do you think of the LACA deal with Canada? Okay, they're just kind of saying, hey, what about us? Let me know. Be sure, guys, to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.